What's up, and welcome back. I'm John Stark from MacMovieGuy.com, your favorite blind film critic. And I finished Adolescence. We're going to talk about it. So this is my series review of Adolescence. And it's the hot Netflix show that is just lighting the world on fire. Uh, it has audio description, so you should watch it. It's only 4 episodes. It just took me a minute because I'm watching like 1,000 different things right now. You think I could have been binge watched something with 4 episodes? I'm not a giant fan of binge watching. Um, I feel like a lot of shows leave you with cliffhangers for a reason because you're supposed to sit in a cliffhanger and think about it before you move on. And sometimes when you have that moment and you don't have that moment to like sit there and think, you're like, oh man, how'd that leave me? Well, let's watch the second episode. Let's immediately have instant gratification. Does that character live or die? I don't know. But, oh my God, I can find out right now. Like, that's kind of the downside of the binge. So I don't do that to myself. Anyway, so I'm a little bit late to Adolescence. I'm sorry, but it's brilliant. Um, the show captures the deeds of a young Jamie and the idea that he may have murdered one of his classmates and sort of the ramifications of that. The first episode is all about sort of the introduction to the crime, the arresting of Jamie, the going over the charges, and everything. And I thought the first episode was excellent. I mean, hands down, Stephen Graham is playing his father. And what I loved about it was that they portrayed Jamie in such a way, which they need to, because based on the way that the first episode ends, as being like, well, this kid could never do that. Like, that kid, you know? So it had a really sort of nice balance. The second episode focuses sort of on the school and the rest of his classmates, and there's a detective that we saw in the first episode that's going through and asking these students, about the situation with Jamie and this girl who's murdered, and what do they know, and there were some other friends of Jamie's who, what were they up to, and friends of hers, and what are their thoughts, what do they have anything to offer. So they're just trying to get clarity. I really liked the second episode too. Third episode I loved. It's largely a child psychiatrist who is evaluating Jamie to see if he is mentally stable enough or whatever to stand trial, or however you want to put that. And so it's like one long conversation between Jamie and this therapist who's asking him a series of questions. And a lot of those questions are based on what you learned sort of in the second episode about reasons Jamie may or may not have done this. And then the fourth episode comes back to how everything affects the family and how they're sort of left behind, and Jamie's being kept in a detention center, and it hasn't had trial yet or anything like that. And it's Dad's birthday, and this is the way they're going to celebrate, I guess. They get a gift they don't want, and they have to deal with it. So that's sort of the least spoilery version that I can give you of the of the series. One of the things everybody loves about the show is that each episode is one long take, which obviously is less cool for a blind person because I can't see however you are managing to make it look like it's one shot. I don't know if you're I'm assuming you didn't actually stage the whole thing in one shot, and it's more of like a 1917 thing where you're finding a way of splicing things in. I think this one take thing that we're doing that the studio also just covered in its second episode. It's kind of brilliant that we're doing it. I love that people are tackling it, and they want to show this sort of like real time progress. And I think it's made even more impressive when you think about how long something is, where something starts and where something ends. Like the first episode starts sort of. I mean, we go from Jamie's house to a uh, all the way to the police center and police station, and they're in an interrogation room at the end of the episode, and the episode's about an hour. So, I mean, that's a really good use of time for you to be able to rip a kid out of his house, put him in a car, drive him down to the police station, get him sort of at least somehow processed and into this uh, room, you know, and the dad and everything is going through that. So, uh, trying to track that real time, you're like, man, would that only take an hour? Could you actually do all of that in an hour? Second episode, he's sort of wandering around the school asking students for different things. And you're sort of following the detective throughout this whole thing. And it feels like it's more than an hour, but it's not. You know, it feels like, how could you achieve more of this than in an hour? Um, and sort of the interesting way in which they shoot it uh, to kind of condense everything. Third episode is the one that feels most like it's real time because it is the least that happens. It is almost entirely in this one room, and it's just a conversation between like two individuals. There's a little bit sort of at the beginning and the end that are not inside that room, but it's almost entirely in one room for the whole episode. And the fourth episode, Jesus, they go everywhere. I mean, they wake up at home, they go outside, and they're like, oh my God, what is that? We got to take care of that. They start to take care of it, and then they're like, well, that doesn't work. So then they get in a car, and then they drive, and they go to a store to try to get things to help, and that doesn't work. And I mean, there's a whole conversation while they're in the car, and then there's a conversation while they're in the car on the way back. It's, I was like, damn, that's a lot of stuff. That's it really makes me feel like I'm not using my time appropriately. So the acting's solid. It'll be interesting to see who gets nominated because nobody has an extraordinary amount of screen time. Jamie seems like the biggest bet because he is technically in 3 of the 4 episodes because you do hear his voice in the fourth episode, and he's physically in the first and third episodes. Stephen Graham, I think, is the biggest name that's attached to the series. He's in the first and fourth episodes. So I don't know. Obviously, the detective has the first and second episode, so it will be interesting. The therapist only has 1 episode. She can't really be considered anything other than supporting with 1 episode. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see where that goes. The UK actually like this enough that they're making this available to all of their schools. They think all the kids should watch this in case they think that there's it goes into a lot of it's gonna sound like I'm victim blaming, but there is an element of bullying that goes into uh, the. It never really fully answers the because we don't get a trial, so there's no actual like guilty. There's just Jamie sort of makes a choice at the end of this, and that sort of gives you the resolution. But and there's video footage that you see in the first one, and you kind of know where it's going. I mean, there could have been like a huge like Harlan Coben surprise at the end, but since we're making all these Harlan Coben things, but no, I don't know. I mean, it just kind of plays it straightforward, and it doesn't try to play around with twist endings and surprises and like, aha, we got you. No, it's pretty much a realistic portrayal of how this could go if this was real, and there is an element of bullying in it, and but it's reflective. It's both. At first, it seems like maybe she was just bullying Jamie, and it's not until later on that you understand that maybe Jamie uh, also did things that he shouldn't have done that got the reaction that he perceived as bullying. You know what I'm saying? Like, there's so at one point you will feel like, oh shit, so she was a bully. And then in another hand, you're going to be like, oh, well, maybe Jamie needs to make better life choices as well. So it goes into the complications of how we treat each other and kids and what they feel comfortable telling each other. And bullying is such a reality. And I feel like that's the thread that runs through this is where bullying can lead, but from both ends. So I'm not victim blaming, but I'm just saying there's a certain point in the series because it sort of reveals her thing before it reveals his thing. So you'll feel that first, and then you'll find out what his thing is. And it doesn't necessarily mean that his thing is more or worse, or it doesn't excuse her thing. It doesn't really excuse anybody. Like, nobody ever walks away from this as being like, well, everything's perfect. I feel great. It's not an upper series. It's just a really well made 4 episode tight limited series with some excellent acting, and it'll open up a lot of conversation, especially if you watch this with your kids, which isn't the worst thing to watch with your kids. Your kids probably already know. I wouldn't watch this with like little kids, like middle school and up. I think you're good. Your middle school kids probably already know everything that's happening is so more than you really want to realize. And I think that's a lot of what this is touching on is because Jamie's 13, they're like, well, this could never happen. And they keep asking him questions that seem, unrealistic for a 13-year-old. But yeah, of course he does. Of course he knows what that is. Seems to be written by people who actually understand that how 13-year-olds do actually know these things. They remember like being 13 and being like, well, I know what that was, somewhere along the way, around like 10, 11, whatever. Depending on when you flip out of childhood, I think there's somewhere around 10, you flip out of childhood and into preteen and then into teenager. You know what I'm saying? Like, so you start realizing more things and are aware of what you're aware of. So Adolescence is everything that everybody says it is. Absolutely worth your time. I think you should check it out. I'm giving Adolescence an A because it deserves it. And it'll probably be nominated for limited series. I would be shocked if it could beat The Penguin. I would be shocked if this beats The Penguin. It does have buzz, so it's probably the best contender for beating The Penguin, but I would be shocked. I mean, because one of them is flashy and has a huge budget behind it, and but now Adolescence is coming up behind it. So anyway, thanks for watching, thanks for subscribing, and I'll see you guys on the other side.